House will come to order. Members, please take seats. Members, come to the floor. Take your seats. We're going to take up a little bit of business first, and then we're going to do some privilege resolutions. Then we're just going to move on with the business of the day. Mr. Clerk, if you'll ring the bell. All members come to the floor. For what purpose does Whip Burchett rise?
To make a motion.
State your motion.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House immediately transmit Senate Bill 465, Austin's Law, to the Senate.
Okay. The motion's been made by Whip Burchett that we immediately transmit Senate Bill 465 to the Senate. Is there objection? Hearing none, it is so ordered. Mr. Clerk, will you read the caption to a group of privileged resolutions?
Honoring the life and memory of Brandon Sean Harris. Honoring the life and memory of Geraldine P. Andrews. Honoring the life and memory of Ella Nicole Knight. Honoring the life and memory of James Cone Jimmy Carter, Jr. Recognizing and commending Jerry Leo Spivey. Recognizing and commending Greg Street. Recognizing and commending the Fellowship Christian Lady Varsity Soccer Team for winning the 2023 GHSA 2A Girls Soccer State Championship. Recognizing and commending the Blessed Trinity Titans Varsity Girls Lacrosse Team. Recognizing and commending Jack Garrett of Blessed Trinity Catholic High School for winning the 2024 GHSA 6A Traditional Wrestling State Championship. Recognizing and commending the Roswell Hornets Boys Lacrosse Team. Recognizing and commending the Roswell Hornets Girls Soccer Team for winning the 2023 GHSA 6A Girls Soccer State Championship. Recognizing and commending Thomas Rhodes of Roswell High School for winning the 2023 GHSA 6A Traditional Wrestling State Championship. Recognizing April 7, 2024 as the Georgia Cup Day and celebrating the Georgia Cup's 27th anniversary. Congratulating and commending Holly Jean Matson, the state winner of the Daughters of the American Revolution 2023-2024 Good Citizen Award. Recognizing and commending Eddie Bernard Harris. Recognizing and commending Minority Leader James Beverly and his outstanding public service as a member of the House of Representatives. Recognizing and commending the Elbert County Chamber of Commerce on the occasion of its 100th anniversary. Congratulating the Green Forest McAuliffe Christian Academy boys and school varsity basketball teams. Recognizing and commending Zakiah N. Harris. Recognizing and commending J.R. Crickets. Recognizing March 22nd, 2024 as Band Together for Our Veterans Day. Commending Midway Elementary School, congratulating the Carrollton High School debate team for winning the 2021, 2022, 2023, and most recently the 2024 GFCA State Debate Championship. Congratulating the University of West Georgia cheerleading team, recognizing and commending Representative Roger Bruce on his outstanding public service as a member of the House of Representatives. Congratulating the Northview High School mock trial team for winning the 2024 Georgia High School mock trial regional championship. Recognizing and commending the Johns Creek High School Orchestra. Congratulating the Grayson High School boys basketball team for winning the 2024 State Basketball Championship. Congratulating the Grayson High School girls basketball team for winning the 2024 State Basketball Championship. Recognizing February 22nd, 2024 is Strolling Thunder Day at the State Capitol. Congratulating the Westside High School Patriots. Commending Venue 338. Recognizing commending Stephen Cotty. recognizing and celebrating Chelsea Rathburn as the Distinguished Poet Laureate of Georgia, recognizing and commending Senator Valencia Say, recognizing and commending the Aga Khan Development Network, and recognizing and commending Gilmer High School's Carson Ferris and Taylor Scheisser. And for other purposes, that completes the reading of the privilege resolutions.
Is there any objection to adopting the privilege resolutions? Members, I usually don't question in these resolutions, but on second thought, Leader, you're fine. We'll leave it in there. On second thought. So is there any objection to adopting the privilege resolutions? The chair hears none. The resolutions are adopted. Mr. Clerk, will you read the caption to Senate Bill 362? 362.
Senate Bill 362 by Senator Hodges III, Still of the 48th, Summers the 13th, Eccles the 49th, and others, being entitled an act to amend Title 50 of the official code of Georgia, annotated relating to state government, so as to provide for requirements relative to employee representation by a labor organization for employers to receive certain economic development incentives from the state. This bill having been referred to the Committee on Industry and Labor, that committee recommends that this bill do pass.
Governor's floor leader, or one of them anyway, Representative Will Wade, is recognized to present the bill. Representative Wade.
Thank you. Thank you, Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity to bring Governor Kemp's legislation here, Senate Bill 362. This bill creates an implied term for prospective economic development incentive agreements that requires, as a condition of eligibility for incentives, employers to protect their employees' privacy and choice in the union organizing process. This bill, employers who accept certain state economic development incentives must agree to the following: that they protect employee privacy and they do not disseminate employee personal information to any union organizers without the employee's consent, allow employees to vote on the issue of union representation in a secret ballot election unless such option is not available under law or any existing bargaining agreements. This bill only applies to the following: companies receiving a defined incentive and only at a facility for which such incentives are given, signed after January of 2025. It does not apply to any existing agreements or contracts that have been issued. I want to just kind of clear for some folks, I'm here to assuage a few that took umbrage during the committee process, and I want to alleviate that. What this bill does is it will make sure that employees' privacy is protected. and that when they vote after the labor union process starts, that they will do so in a secret ballot. Now, that is only for those companies that wish to enter into a contract for incentives. It does not apply to all companies at large. Companies can choose to organize under either option as law allows. Again, this bill only applies for those companies that are wanting to receive tax incentives. I think that we have heavily debated this bill. It did pass out of the Senate. It is now here for this body's consideration, and I'm happy to yield for any questions, but I do appreciate your favorable consideration.
Gentlemen, yield for question.
I do.
Representative Roman, right out in front of you to your left.
Thank you. Does the gentleman yield?
I do.
So it says that any employer that does engage in willingly accepting a union in their company would have to pay back what they had received as part of those investment incentives.
Would you point out the line specific to where that's?
Yeah, look, I saw it earlier. I can find it, but I guess my question is, once I find the line, I can come and find you about it later. Yeah, here it is. It's line 42 through 44. An employer that engages in any activity prohibited by Section B of this code section in the performance of a project shall repay any and all economic development incentives received over the life of such project. If that were to be the case, say for example, a company did do that project, they completed the project, they're done, and then after their contract is over, they choose to willingly recognize a union, would they still have to pay it back even after the fact? Do we know?
No, it is clearly based during the life of the project. So if the project has been completed, then that contractual agreement is then no longer in force. Thank you for the question. I'll yield for one more question.
Gentlemen, yield for one more question. Representative Devin Seabaugh has a question. Where's Representative Seabaugh to your left?
Oh, thank
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
I do yield.
Is it not true this bill will protect the workers of our state by protecting the right to privacy from both employers and colleagues?
That is true. Thank you for the question. Mr. Speaker, I appreciate our members. I think most of them are very well informed on this bill, and I look forward to their favorable consideration, and I would like to yield the well. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Gentlemen, yielded the well. The wisdom of the Rules Committee. Our conversation on Senate Bill 362 will be limited by the rule 33.3. There will be 30 minutes for those in favor, 30 minutes for those opposed, up to 20 minutes for the minority report, and up to 20 minutes for the chair's time. We'll begin the first 30 minutes with Representative Kennard. Representative Greg Kennard is recognized to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to SB 362. I agree with Tom Brokaw that the greatest generation are those that were born in the early 20th century. I think they had some qualities that set them apart and helped them to overcome some specific historical challenges in that era. That's the era of my grandparents, and they are textbook pre-boomers. They lived through the Great Depression. They overcame polio. My father contracted polio as a young child, and it was the indomitable, relentless grit of my grandmother that willed him to just a full recovery. They were both active in World War II. My grandfather served in the Navy. He was a pilot, and he served as a mechanic based out of San Diego. And then my grandmother was the quintessential Rosie Riveter, we can do it. She joined the workforce, and along with so many other U.S. women, held the U.S. economy together during the war. The greatest generation indeed. After the war, my grandfather moved back home to Fort Worth, Texas, and a few years later they moved to Georgia, and that started our Georgia journey here. They moved to Georgia for two reasons. One, my grandfather took a call to ministry and became the pastor of Dallas Assembly of God in Paulding County, where he served for about a decade. And then he came to Lockheed as a worker. He was attracted to the work. He was a pilot. He was a mechanic. And so he became a part of the union workforce at Lockheed. My grandfather was a natural leader, so he became the chairman of that union force, and it was a win-win. It was a very comfortable living for our grandfather. It was a competitive wage. There were good benefits, and it was a win for Lockheed because my grandfather was a very skilled and talented worker. As a matter of fact, my uncle just retired from Lockheed, where he served just shy of 40 years, and he worked also as a labor union worker as well. It was a win-win for him. It was a win-win for the company, who got a great and talented and skilled worker. You know, the labor union force in Georgia is so small. Out of 100 workers, only 4 are union workers. So my first question is, why do we need any kind of measure that would address this at all when it's such a small part of our workforce? And for the 4% that is workforce and part of the union, it's working for them. And we all are aware of the workforce shortages and deficits we have in the state. Why would we do anything to be anti-labor when we need to attract more workers from any source available? My favorite committee that I sit on is Industry and Labor. I appreciate the chairman of that committee. He does a good job. But it is not the industry committee, it is industry and labor. We tout ourselves as a pro-business state, and I think we should tout ourselves. We should take a victory lap for that, but I also think we should be the best place in the country to work. We can also be pro-labor as well as pro-business. We can chew gum and walk. We don't have to be one or the other. So there's a favorite author that I read after. He says, you can love chocolate without hating vanilla. So my question is, why can't we love business and love labor? Why do we have to have an anti-labor bill? I oppose 362. I appreciate your no vote. Thank you.
Gentleman is yielded well. Representing Mandisha Thomas is recognized to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Greetings, colleagues. I rise in opposition of Senate Bill 362. Senate Bill 362 restricts Georgia business owners from independently deciding how to manage their employees, potentially hindering more efficient and cost-effective methods like voluntary recognition. It's crucial for the state to trust business owners with autonomy in decision-making without dictating union conduct. Preserving card-check elections ensures workers' abilities to discuss unions directly and discreetly with colleagues, safeguarding against undue management influence. Senate Bill 362 effectively enables bad faith employer behavior by facilitating intimidation and coercion tactics to discourage workers from union participation. Companies annually allocate significant resources to anti-union firms which target and terminates union activists, conduct intimidating meetings, silence union supporters, and impede workers' union efforts. According to the Economic Policy Institute, U.S. employers face charges of violating federal labor laws, protecting union formation, in 41.5% of union election campaigns. The implication of secret ballot elections are proposed in Senate Bill 362. Undermines the fairness and democratic nature of union elections, aligning with the agenda of anti-worker and anti-union entities pushing similar legislation nationwide. Senate Bill 362 not only defies established standards by targeting both businesses and workers, but also companies. Federal labor relations outlined in the National Labor Relations Act of 1935, which recently expanded the right to unionize through card check recognition. On August 25, 2023, the NLRB, which is the National Labor Relations Board, the federal entity overseeing union elections, issued a 100-page ruling introducing 2 new pathways for workers to be acknowledged for forming a union via check recognition rather than secret ballot elections. This obvious disregard for federal statutes could mean the state funds could be squandered on litigation, jeopardizing the resources of taxpayers and businesses, all for the sake of political spectacle aimed from undermining the freedoms rightly owed to workers and businesses. Advocates for Senate Bill 362 argue against the perceived undue influence of union organizers during the union formation process. However, this stance overlooks existing federal safeguard protocols and extensive training for union activists and organizers aimed at preventing such interferences. In my early 20s, under the work of Cesar Chavez, I organized strawberry workers who had to endure working conditions without accessible bathrooms, where they had to relieve themselves in the same fields that they picked from. I assisted in organizing home health care workers through SEIU Union, where not receiving fair compensation. I do not believe that we should tolerate unions being mishandled and misclassified, considering their vital role in supporting hundreds of thousands of workers across this great state of Georgia. Unions have been one of the bones to a rib cage that has sustained working families in this nation, and I urge you to vote no on Senate Bill 362. Mr. Speaker, I yield the well.
The lady has yielded the well. Representative Tran, you're recognized to speak to the bill. Representative Tran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to speak against Senate Bill 362. I'm going to tell you a little story about my family that I'm sure some of you have heard before. My parents arrived here in 1975 after the Vietnam War. The only work they could get was pushing grocery carts and cleaning apartments. We were very poor, and even that is an understatement to the environment that my parents faced when they came over here. My dad eventually got a job on the assembly line with GM. He became a union worker. That gave him the ability to go to college, become a mechanical engineer, and rise through the ranks of General Motors, where he stayed for over 30 years. Without question, the middle-class family lifestyle my family lived through that created a doctor out of my sister, an attorney out of my brother, an accountant out of my other brother, and a coffee shop owner / politician here today, is because of the opportunities given by the American dream through the strength of the middle class. We can't ignore what created the middle class here in America, and that is unions. And I can't believe we are today having a debate whether or not government should be picking and choosing the winners of businesses. I, as a small business owner, should have the final decision in how I handle labor and workforce with my business. I shouldn't have to be worried about whether or not one day I'm selling coffee to the state under a state incentive or state contract and be told, well, you can't do that because of how you made your decisions regarding labor. That's government overreach. I won't get into the federal details of how this violates federal laws. That right there is government overreach. There's a word that you guys, I know most people in here, dislike. But when government picks and chooses how businesses operate and which businesses are the winners and losers, it's called communism. It's what my family fled from. It's what I dislike. I have huge disdain. And I am a small government person, just like my colleagues on the other aisle. So it befuddles me that you want to pick and choose how a business does labor, does incentives and contracts with the state based on how they negotiate with labor. That should be up to us as business owners. Because if you negotiate right with hard-working middle-class Georgian families, you may find that you have employees that will work for you for 30 years and help grow your business. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the well.
Gentleman is yielded the will. Representative Anulowitz is recognized to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise before you all today to speak against Senate Bill 362. For the past several years, I have worked alongside Georgia workers and advocacy groups fighting for better workplace protections. The members of the House Judiciary Committee, in particular, are very familiar about the policy issues of which I speak. With the support of a broad, statewide, bipartisan coalition, I have fought for these protections because we know that while Georgia is, say it with me guys, do a shot, X out your bingo square, the #1 state for business, we are also one of the worst states for workers. We also know that as of just a few weeks ago, favorable support for organized labor in Georgia, it's around 72%. 72% of Georgians have a favorable opinion of organized labor. And that fact, this data, tells us that support for organized labor is not a partisan issue. So here, as we say, is our current posture, right? When it comes to organized labor, we are the #1 state for business. We're one of the very worst states for workers. And we have overwhelming support for organized labor throughout Georgia and obviously across party lines. We know that reaching that point of critical mass, that point where workers, the workers we know we need, the point where those workers will simply pass on Georgia, it is inevitable and it is imminent. The data supports this. But as we all know, you can't have data without narrative. And I am guessing that in the run-up to this vote today, you've likely heard from a constituent or three who supports organized labor. I know that House District 42, where I serve, we are home to hundreds of food and commercial workers, and we are notably home to IAM Local 709. That's the Machinists Union with close to about 2,000 members. They work for a large aerospace manufacturer you may be familiar with. The folks on the second floor know that our employers are not chomping at the bit to do right by their workers. Georgia workers definitely recognize that help and support from their employers is definitely not on the way, and I would surmise that that dissonance is why we currently see the level of support for organized labor in Georgia that we have not had in decades. But rather than encourage businesses to do right by their workers or strengthen our laws that protect workers in Georgia, this bill would instead let the current status quo anti-worker client continue to flourish in Georgia while illegally limiting the rights of workers to organize despite the clear and convincing widespread support for organized labor. Senate Bill 362 does nothing to address the myriad reasons why so many Georgians support our unions, and it is for this reason that I urge you to vote no. Thank you. I yield the well.
Lady is yielded the well. Representative Wilkerson recognized to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in opposition to Senate Bill 362. And yes, that is House Bill 481 on the screen. I'm going to talk about two quick points and then I'll leave the well. Several weeks ago, I was one of the people that voted for this bill because as we looked at our retirement plans, we said we had to basically do what was in the best interest of the employees of the state of Georgia. Because we didn't want woke legislation. We didn't want people to say, because they're not doing this, we always want to look at the return. So that brings me to the 362 is how does that fit in with this? And it doesn't, because what we're saying right here is even if you are the best at what you do, you will not get an economic incentive from the state. So I try to reconcile the two and I realize I can't. So while I supported that, I will oppose this because I think that's kind of consistent. I'm not asking everybody to do that, but the second thing is, with that said, I started looking at the bill in lines 29 and 30 and 40 and 41. If you don't mind taking a look at that, I believe that's probably the chamber clause. Because I was wondering why the chamber would support a bill that would forbid the state from actually working with great companies. My colleagues have talked about the great labor, the reliable labor you can get with our union and our organized labor. What this says is you can't force a subcontractor to do it, but if you want, you can use a subcontractor that only uses union labor. So basically, you are creating a middleman that can get the economic incentive, but only use union labor. So they get their cut off the top and then use union labor to make sure the job gets done right. So that's not in the best interest of the state of Georgia. It's going to cost us more money in the long run, and we're going to end up with more companies that decide they want to get an economic incentive than to go back to a union state because they don't like what we're doing. So I would encourage us to say no to this bill, vote for the best interest of the state of Georgia, and vote for the best interests of the workers of Georgia. And with that, I yield the well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman has yielded the well. Representative Draper is recognized to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to urge you to vote no to SB 362. It is undeniable that Georgia has a labor shortage. That is just a fact. The governor has said on this issue just a few months ago, we have workforce needs in literally almost every sector in Georgia. In order to sustain the growth coming to our state, we have got to keep putting more people in that workforce. The governor has also been a big proponent of expanding the electric vehicle industry in Georgia. And with that expansion has come many new job opportunities. Hyundai, Q-Cells, thousands of jobs all over the state. And when it comes to these EV jobs in particular, and as well as many other new job opportunities arising in Georgia, we don't just have a labor shortage problem, we have a skilled labor shortage problem. We simply do not have the skilled workforce in Georgia to fill all of these new jobs, not right now. So these companies in search of skilled labor are left with two options. Option one, they can train up a workforce, but that of course takes time. Or option two, they can recruit skilled labor from out of state now, when companies need that labor. And so I am really left scratching my head about SB 362, because if you accept that labor drives growth, as our governor has said, and you accept that we have a labor deficit, as our governor has said, and you accept that recruiting out-of-state skilled labor is the only viable option for some of the companies that we have incentivized to come to Georgia, as is the case, why are we passing legislation that will make it harder for companies to fill the jobs that they bring to Georgia? Why are we taking options off of the table? SB 362 ties the hands of companies to recruit and retain out-of-state skilled labor. Skilled union members are not going to move to a place where bills like SB 362 are being passed. These are highly skilled employees, desirable employees. They can go anywhere they want and get the terms that they want. They will go elsewhere. And businesses will be left without workers, and they will go elsewhere too. This bill undermines one of our biggest challenges to more growth in Georgia, recruiting and retaining labor. In addition to recruiting and retaining talent, there are many reasons why a company may wish to have a choice when it comes to card check or an election. Maybe they know with confidence from speaking with their employees that what the results of an election would be. Maybe they want to avoid the disruption and expense of an election campaign. Why would we take a choice away from our businesses that they are in the best position to make? Now, I'll close with one last point. As an attorney, I get frustrated when this body tries to pass legislation that is contrary to well-settled law. And let me assure you, the question of whether the state can penalize a company for federally protected behavior is well-settled law. The choice an employer has to grant voluntary recognition of a union or pursue a secret ballot election is a protected choice under the National Labor Relations Act. The United States Supreme Court has long recognized that the National Labor Relations Act preempts state laws which interfere with its purpose or penalize behavior protected by the act. So if this bill passes, there will be a lawsuit, and it will cost Georgia taxpayers millions of dollars, and the state will lose. So let me ask you again earnestly, what are we doing with this bill? Please vote no.
Lady yields the well. I think she has. I interpreted. Representative Roman is recognized to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, I rise today in strong opposition to Senate Bill 362. In Georgia, the minimum wage still on our books is $5.15 an hour from 2009. Technically, it's $7.25 because of federal law. Either way, back then the average cost of a home was around $200,000. Today, it's $410,000. To really hit home, a person has to make about $20 an hour just to afford rent, yet our minimum wage hasn't changed. Gas is sometimes almost double the cost of what it used to be in 2009, yet the minimum wage has stayed the same. This doesn't take into account the skyrocketing cost of education, food, healthcare, and the myriad of other things people need just to get by. We have people working 2 to 3 jobs and still cannot afford to live. And this isn't just recent or due to inflation, which has been a global phenomenon and which we've fared far better than most around the world. No, this is specifically due to the fact that we have put workers last at every turn. In Georgia, we pride ourselves on being the #1 state to do business, but unfortunately, in our singularly focused efforts, we left behind our most precious resource, our people. So much so that we now rank last in healthcare. Last. So why then are we, with this bill, now telling companies that if they choose to willingly give their workers an opportunity to advocate for themselves, we will punish them? Who does this help? And I know some of you are going to say this is a privacy thing and that this is a big deal and we need to protect workers' privacy, but the reality of the situation is this goes way beyond that. This doesn't help Georgians. We should be incentivizing companies that care for their workers, not punishing them as this bill does. And I want to repeat, the world is very different from 10 to 20 years ago. This bill essentially says that companies must go through the burdensome process of a secret ballot even if they would rather willingly recognize the union in their workplace. If they willingly choose to recognize a union, they lose out on economic development incentives, making them less competitive. In other words, if you willingly work with your employees for everyone's benefit, you could be punished. But if you force a process nobody wants, you will be rewarded. A process, by the way, that we have seen be riddled with intimidation. So why are we taking this choice away from companies? Who does this help? I can tell you who it hurts: Georgians. The deck is already stacked against workers, from a minimum wage that hasn't been updated in 15 years to corporations attempting to extract more out of us for less in return. We cannot continue down this path. This bill does nothing more than continue to tip the scales in favor of those who do not care about our people. Our job is to care. Our job is to tip the scales in favor of our constituents. It's our job to be their advocates, not pass bills like this that undercut one of the few tools they have for better working conditions and better pay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the well.
Ladies yielded the well. Representative McClain is recognized to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, colleagues, I rise today in opposition of SB 362. I've always said it's a bill that's it's a solution in search of a problem. It has to be. You know, I mean, we all were at the breakfast back in January, and I heard what the governor said. Many of you all heard that. And it's, you know, we've heard the facts today. You've heard from almost all of the speakers today. You're only talking about 4% of workers that are unionized. The other 96% just here. So what are we trying to do? So you got 96 out of 4, so you want to really squash them. And then you've got 71% of folks that have been surveyed who said that they would like to have a union or something like that. And I always tell people that we've got to make sure that we take care of the workers. You know, I go back to this group back when I first came years ago and I've always said something: right is right, wrong is wrong. And this bill right here is wrong. HB 714 was wrong. When we took away the unemployment away from the bus drivers, that was wrong. Why do we always find a way to pick on workers? That is wrong. There's nothing right about picking on workers. Every time that we do something, week before last, what we did with the data centers. Sure, the data centers don't create many jobs, but they are constructed by who? Workers. So what do? We always find a way to pick on workers. And then we talk about transparency. Transparency? I want to read you something. I want to read you something from Saturday's paper. In Saturday's paper, Amazon violated workers' rights at crucial air hub regulators. Workers at Amazon Air Hub in Kentucky celebrated a victory Thursday after the federal labor regulators found that Amazon violated labor laws by trying to prevent workers from unionizing. The employees have been demanding higher pay, more flexible schedules, and safer working conditions since 2022. After a month-long investigation, the National Labor Relations Board issued a complaint against Amazon. It is always the companies that are always working, they're picking on workers. Because you know why? Because they are the ones where the workers have to go. If you're going to join a union, this is a right-to-work state. You know what right to work means? Right to work means I can fire you for how you look, how you walk, how you talk, or anything, because it's a right what? A right-to-work state. It's nothing more than that. And what we've got to try to do is take care of the workers. And if we can't take care of the workers, we can't be the #1 state to do business, because you need workers to do business. And I say this because what I want to do is encourage you all to vote no on this, because we always say we're the #1 place to do business, and I've been looking for that. But you know, we're down to one magazine that says we're the #1 place to do business. We're down to one. And all you need is one. All you need is one. But I assure you, if there's a lot of green up there today, we will lose that one. That one will not be in Georgia. And I would hate to be part of the legislature that have taken away Georgia's right to be the #1 state to do business, because anyone who votes for this bill is voting to take Georgia out of that slot from that one magazine. So, Mr. Speaker, I hope that this House is not that House. I hope these members are not those members. I hope this House can stand up for the workers. I hope this House can do less. We always talk about less government. We always talk about less business. Let's talk about it. You know, we don't need more business. We don't need more government. And yes, I oppose SB 362, because I was told the last time I came to well, Mr. Speaker, I didn't tell if I was for a bill or not for a bill. But I want you to know I'm opposing SB 362, and I hope that you all join me for the simple reason of SB 362 will take us out of the #1 spot to do business in Georgia. I promise you that. Because why? Why would a worker want to come and be part of Georgia? Why would a business want to become part of Georgia if we only have one way to do things in Georgia? Mr. Speaker, I'm going to yield as well with one thing. Again, House members, right is right, wrong is wrong, and do the right thing today by voting no. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the well.
Thank you, Representative. That concludes those opposed to the bill. Chairman Werkheiser is recognized to speak to the bill for up to 30 minutes. Representative Werkheiser.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have got a bombshell for y'all. But let me back up. So, as I'm about to prove, I'm not a very good speaker, so I've got to make up for it in research. And so, we spent several hours on this in Industry and Labor, and was working on this last night, late into the evening, and either by dumb luck, or as I would say, the Lord gave me a lifeline. I got a call from my good friend Tom Kirby, who has one heck of a memory. I can't remember what I had for lunch yesterday, but he can quote you Section 34, which this bill is in, chapter and verse. And if you've ever seen that magic in Industry and Labor, it's something to behold. But he reminded me of something that happened 10 years ago. So I'm going to ask you, if you're a Republican and you were in this body in 2013, stand up. If you were in this body and you're a Republican in 2013, stand up. It should be 19 of y'all. And Chairman Green and Colonel Hitchens, you can sit down. If you were a Democrat here in 2013, stand up. Colonel Hitchens and Gerald Green, you can join this crowd. Those were the yay and nay votes on House Bill 361. And when Tom told me this, he was just telling me, I remember he didn't have the House bill or anything. And I said, well, we got to find that bill. And so later on, an hour later, I was having my nightly call with my wife, and a text pops up from Tom, and he sends me a link. And so, sure enough, House Bill 361, I'm going to ask the clerk, thanks to Betsy and her work, to show us House Bill 361 from 10 years ago. And it's going to be a little hard to read, but Section 2, I think it's line 43, says that card checks are not legal in Georgia. We did that 10 years ago. So for 2 hours in industry and labor and for an hour and a half today, we're going to hear arguments that this violates the National Labor Relations Act of 1935, and there will be immediate lawsuits. So I'd have to ask you, in the last 10 years, where are those lawsuits? There was another argument brought up just a few minutes ago that this will cause companies not to come here. I don't know if there's been a stretch of period in our state's history that we have landed more jobs than in the last 10 years since this bill was enacted. Our governor, along with Pat Wilson, has had almost weekly job announcements, and I think it's close to 80% of those outside of the metro areas. In fact, in my area of the state, I don't think you're going to be able to recognize it. Evans County is 19 miles away from the metal plant. I predict by redistricting, they'll have their own state rep. They'll probably be glad for that. And to the representative that said this will remove our spot from being the #1 business, ironically, I think that was the first year we got that, and we've gotten it 10 years since. So I'm going to, and my apologies to the speaker, leadership, the author of the bill, which I just spoke to, for not bringing this to y'all. Again, this was, finished my research about midnight last night, and still, bills are written in legalese. I could not wrap my head around the fact that we had passed this 10 years ago. So I called my good friend Ed Lindsay, who authored this bill, and we played phone tag this morning for a while, and finally came to my office about 9:45. And Ed Lindsay was the chair of this, was the author of the bill. Mark Hamilton, who was chairman of Industry and Labor when I first came here, was the second signer. Barry Fleming was the third signer, and then Tom Kirby. So the top three were actually in this building today. So this bill passed on, we're celebrating the 10-year anniversary of this just last week. Went over to the Senate. As they usually do, they mess with our bills and not use in a good fashion, so it came back to us we insisted and ended up getting the House version, and the governor signed this into law on May 6, 2013. So we're in an interesting position. We could actually light that board up red and it would still be illegal to do card check if you're a union. So what we're really doing is eliminating all these arguments that we're going to argue about, and this bill is really just putting teeth into it that says that if you want to be a union in Georgia, forget the card check, secret ballot argument, because that was settled 10 years ago. But if you want to come here and be a union, then you would lose the incentive. So that's really what we're voting on. And so with that, Mr. Speaker, I'll yield the well and allow others to speak. But just wanted to give us some historical perspective. Thank you.
Gentleman has yielded the well. That completes those speaking in favor. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? Chair has none. The previous question is ordered. We now have a minority report, and we will have the chair's time. There's a minority report for up to 20 minutes. Whip Park is recognized to speak to the bill and present the minority report. Whip Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, I rise in opposition to Senate Bill 362. This bill is constitutionally suspect, bad for business, and bad for workers. Certainly, I hope everyone here would agree with me that Georgia's changed a lot in the past 10 years, since 2013, and I so appreciate my Chairman of Industry and Labor for the past few years of highlighting House Bill 361 that passed almost a decade ago. Now, my understanding from what I've heard is that Georgia was sued as a result of passage of that bill, and Georgia lost on 361 when it was first enacted almost 10 years ago. And yet here we are, 10 years afterwards, apparently not having learned our lesson when it comes to the U.S. Constitution's Supremacy Clause, which I would like to discuss with y'all this afternoon. Senate Bill 362 violates Article 6, Clause 2 of the U.S. Constitution, that is the Supremacy Clause, which provides that federal law shall be the supreme law of the land, and that judges in every state shall be bound thereby. States violate this provision when they pass laws that contravene, contradict, or interfere with federal law. So SB 362 is unconstitutional because it contradicts and interferes with the National Labor Relations Act, or the NLRA, which governs relations between employers and unions. SB 362 violates the NLRA because it uses state power to penalize employers for engaging in specifically protected activity. Section 9C of the NLRA provides that employees may select a union to represent them through either voluntary recognition or through a secret ballot election. Lines 34 to 36 of the bill, however, interferes with the ability of employers to voluntarily grant recognition and would prohibit employers who choose to comply with federal law from receiving Georgia economic development incentives, which includes federal dollars. Please see on lines 14 OCGA 50-8-A, and specifically subsections B6 and to P. In Chambers of Commerce of the United States versus Brown, decided in 2008, the U.S. Supreme Court reiterated its long-standing position that the NLRA preempts state laws which interfere with its purposes or penalize behavior protected by the Act. In that case, California passed a less burdensome law than SB 362, which required only that employers contracting with the state to disclose certain union activity. The U.S. Supreme Court struck down the law as preempted by the NLRA because it attempted to regulate in an area reserved for the Act and the National Labor Relations Board, or the NLRB. Now, in NLRB versus Arizona, a U.S. District Court in Arizona heard the NLRB's challenge to Arizona's constitutional amendment requiring secret ballot elections. Contrary to the testimony in Senate committee meetings, the court did not find that the constitutional amendment did not violate the U.S. Constitution. Rather, the district court found that Arizona had never applied the amendment in question and that the court could therefore not say that it was unconstitutional in all possible applications. The court closed by saying that its ruling should not be construed to foreclose as applied challenges if and when they materialize. If and when Arizona applies its constitutional amendment to prohibit or penalize conduct protected by the NLRA, it will be found to violate the U.S. Constitution. The U.S. Constitution is clear with respect to the supremacy clause that is violated by SB 362. Passage of this bill will only lead to costly litigation in which Georgia taxpayers are left footing the bill for a politically motivated piece of legislation that will hurt Georgia businesses and hardworking Georgia workers. Now, it's been said this bill does not require anything of employers who do not seek funds or economic development incentives that, again, include federal funds or federal grant programs. Again, I would urge y'all to look up Georgia law, OCGA 50-8 on lines 14, to identify those federal programs that are otherwise involved in this unconstitutional piece of legislation. By conditioning receipt of economic incentives with violating federal law, this politically motivated bill creates uncertainty in the business arena, restricts businesses' operational freedom, and disincentivizes companies who may value and prioritize flexibility in labor relations from investing or expanding in Georgia, especially those employers who can bring advanced manufacturing back to our state, as mentioned by some of my Democratic colleagues. Penalizing legally compliant employers who contribute to the state's economic growth only endangers millions of dollars in investments and provides employers here in Georgia every incentive either not to come to Georgia or to leave. Along with creating unnecessary instability in the marketplace, this bill and this anti-union sentiment is bad for Georgia workers and undoubtedly undermines efforts to address our state's skilled workforce shortage. Unions play a critical role in creating quality jobs that pay a fair wage here in Georgia. Moreover, unions such as IBEW, who helped complete construction of Plant Vogtle, the first nuclear power plant constructed in the United States in more than 40 years, provides industry-specific workforce development programs that, as demonstrated, have been instrumental to Georgia's success. As again mentioned by one of my Democratic colleagues, for the past 7 to 8 years, I've had the good fortune and opportunity to serve in the Georgia House Industry and Labor Committee, where one of the key lessons I've learned is the importance of ensuring a balance between industry and labor, finding that balance between employers and employees. While I certainly support businesses coming into Georgia, and while it is great that Georgia is one of the best places for businesses to invest, it seems clear to me, based on the facts that we face, particularly our shortage in skilled workers, that we are out of balance. And we as a body must do much more, not to politicize this issue, but to invest and support hardworking Georgia workers. For all these reasons, I urge each member in this body to vote no to Senate Bill 362, and I will yield the well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentlemen, yield to the well. Representative Jasmine Clark is recognized to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon, colleagues. Today I rise to ask you to vote no on this bill. In the words of Lauryn Hill, it could all be so simple, but you'd rather make it hard. This bill epitomizes government overreach by punishing businesses for doing things the way they want to do it. That's what this bill does. Is that really the way we want to do things in the, quote, #1 place to do business? Do we want to go on the record for attacking businesses that want to start or locate here in Georgia because they choose to voluntarily recognize unions? That would be very anti-business of us. Is that really the precedent we want to set? Is that really the direction we want to go? What if voters were to elect a pro-union governor that decided it would be good policy to remove incentives from any private business that did not want to unionize? The thing about laws is that they can outlive your political or partisan posturing. The law you pass today to target your political foes could turn into the law that can be used to punish you in the future. It's all fun until the rabbits got the gun. But I digress. This bill mandates bureaucracy. It tells businesses that in order to get incentives from the state, they are required to spend money on secret ballot elections, even if they would prefer to use that money to support their employees. Now, throughout committee, all these other things, I've heard a lot about intimidation, but this bill is legitimately state-sponsored intimidation. It actually borders on being straight up bribery, threatening to financially punish businesses that are supportive of unions. This is a job-killing bill. People looking for a business-friendly state to locate may second-guess going to a state that tells them how to spend their money and how to run their business. Finally, this bill is an anti-worker bill. As we saw during the height of the pandemic, businesses are only as strong as their workers. Workers are the engine that drives business. Without an engine, where are you going? If you go anywhere, I promise you're not going far. This anti-union measure actively harms Georgia's economy. See, the thing about Georgia is it's already hostile to unionization. And the result of this has been horrible for Georgia's economy. You want to talk about fun facts? Did you know that according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics of Georgia, Georgia has one of the lowest median earnings for full-time workers in the country. This actually tracks with other anti-union states. So, regardless of how you feel about unions, I'm curious, why would we vote for less money for our constituents? I don't know about you, but I want my constituents to be able to thrive. Because when people go to work every day and still can't make ends meet, they aren't going to bring their best. And this tracks with Georgia's hostility towards unions, as Georgia has a high quit rate that surpasses the national average. I have firsthand knowledge of how unions offer livable wages because I raised my family on union wages. So I'll wrap up by saying this. Georgia is already a right-to-work state, and those policies have already put our constituents in a position of making less money doing the same job as someone in a pro-union state. This bill goes even farther by impacting a way a new business spends its own money and disincentivizes and punishes employers that support workers' right to unionize. It mandates bureaucracy and costly elections. It kills jobs. Y'all, it could be so simple. Let's not make it hard. Support hardworking Georgians that send you here to represent their interests. Please vote no on SB 362. Mr. Speaker, I yield the well.
Lady has yielded the world. Representative Glaze is recognized to speak to the bill. Representative Lydia Glaze.
I only stand here as a union worker, probably only 4 in this august body. I got to work for 4 years as the labor liaison for United Way of Greater Atlanta to take care of our union members. I didn't see them as union members. I see them like I see my colleagues in here. People who need our help at different points in time. People who bring their skills and services to work every day and leave everything on the table inside of their workplace. I rise today in opposition of SB 362, this anti-union bill. Where is it happening? In the state of Georgia, where it's only 4% density of union workers, where we're #1 place in the whole United States to work, and we're worried about 4%. Why? Why? are Georgia businesses now going to have to lose a subsidy if they voluntarily recognize unions? My question is then, what are unions? What is it that is so bad about unions? I only remember that they were the bedrock of progress for the entire United States. I don't know anybody who could go against that. What have been the outcomes? They have built cities. They have built families. They built neighborhoods. They built what we know now are major businesses. Hey, I went to Kroger last night. Isn't that a union business? It is. The truth of the matter is we need to be asking, who is afraid of unions? Who's afraid of unions? Who's afraid of the people who look like us, who walk and talk like us, who do the business of Georgia like us, who go to work like us every day? Who's afraid of them? I tell you, if we walk in fear, we do not build Georgia and we do not build the United States of America. I again ask you to rise with me in opposition of SB 362. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the well.
The lady has yielded the well. Representative Al Williams is recognized to speak to the bill. Representative Williams, hate to break up your nap.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 5 minutes. Takes me 3 minutes to walk up here. 2 minutes to talk. Once again, I'm the only rural legislator in opposition. We never get a chance to talk, but most of the manufacturing is located in rural Georgia. So I'm not going the route that my esteemed colleagues did. I'm going to go down history. I'm an amateur historian. Mine is strictly personal. You've heard the facts, the figures, or whatever, according to which end you believe and whatever, but I do know this, that there's not an individual in the Georgia General Assembly. There are a lot of them that worked on union jobs longer than Al Williams, but there ain't nobody here has supported unions longer than Al Williams. I walked my first picket line in 1965. So I think I have a right to say something, and it's a whole lot more than 5 minutes, but I'll cut it down and say this. Personally, I think there's a great balance between labor and industry. There must be. And we've demonized in Georgia for so many years the word labor. Should not be demonized. I think of labor, I think of a little boy named Al Williams in Liberty County whose daddy worked hard. Tipped, asking him for a dime, and he's going in his pocket, and I'm tiptoeing to look in his hand. And when he finds the dime, I ask him, "What's that, Daddy?" It was beside the dime. And he showed it to me, and it was what we call Babbitt at the time. It had the name of a company on it and could only be spent in that company's store. The Constitution of these United States plainly states that the money will only be printed and minted by the United States government, yet my daddy spent a significant portion of his working career being paid in tin money called Babbitt. Historically, unions have brought us from the depth of poverty and created in general in this country, but in particular among African Americans, a middle class. During the great migration from the South, simply because there was no money to be made, folk went north. I have uncles that didn't go north, but I can never forget the sleeping car porters under A. Philip Randolph, when all sleeping car porters were called George. And they formed a union primarily to be given the right to wear a name tag and be called by their name. And that's when the name George disappeared from Pullman porters. I can remember bringing it closer to home when legendary leaders like Bill White in Savannah, Georgia, president of 1414 of the Longshoremen's Union, stood for getting people registered to vote. And this terrible union leader, all he required was that you have a voter registration card when your name was called to go work on the waterfront. I can recall other legendary names. People like Bill Lucy, who happened to be a dear friend of mine, just stepped down as head of the Congress of the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists, the longest working president of a trade union in America. Lucy just stepped down, dear friend who worked for the rights of workers. While we in Georgia spent a lifetime speaking of demonizing, wanting to have a fair wage, health insurance, and dignity on the job. This bill, like every other bill, has good parts and bad parts. Don't believe that it just goes away at construction, because that's not true. I've done too many of these contracts. They usually last the life of the allocations you've made. When we talk about tax abatements, etc., that's for the life of most of the loans. This could be 10, 15, 20 years that we can punish somebody for letting a union come in. Listen, I made a living as an independent businessman and a consultant. So this does not directly affect me. This is strictly from the heart. Everybody deserves the right to a good living. You don't have to talk about quick start if you need folk who've been trained by unions. The light is red. One day when I have some time and my caucus decides I can talk long enough, I'll tell you the rest of that story. Thank you, Mr. Whip, for my 3.5 minutes. Mr. Speaker, I yield the well.
Representative Williams, I look forward to getting together with you and hearing the rest of the story at some point in time about a lot of things. That concludes those opposed, concludes the minority report. We'll now hear the chairman's time for up to 20 minutes. Chairman Werkheiser is recognized to speak to the bill. Chairman Werkheiser.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be brief and yield most of my time, but I want to talk about the process just for a couple of minutes. When this bill came to my committee and heard a lot of discourse about in the Senate, it was rushed through. They didn't get a chance to say their piece, and I assured them that everybody that had something to say would get that opportunity. So we had more than a 2-hour hearing and heard this bill. And again, like I mentioned earlier, I like to do research. So this bill is very similar to the bill that was passed out of Tennessee a year ago. So through one of our associations and a contact I had, I contacted the legislature in Tennessee and actually got further up the chain than I thought. The chief counsel for the Speaker's office let me know that it's been a year since the bill's passed. There has been no litigation with the National Labor Board. So if the state of Tennessee contacts you, I may or may not have committed that you owe them one. With that, I do have an interesting proposition for you. If you're against this bill, a few minutes ago, you might want to vote for it, because what I've said 10 years ago, since we made card check illegal, anytime you pass a bill, you do away with the previous bill. So if you vote for this bill, it would only make card check illegal if you took incentives. So this would be a stronger union bill than the bill they passed in 10 years. So there's a proposition for you. And with that, I'm going to yield my time to Sue Hong.
Gentleman is yielded well. Representative Hong is recognized to speak to the bill on part of the chairman's time. Representative Hong.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Chairman. Chairman has pointed out important points, so I won't take too much of your time, but I wanted to make sure and clarify certain points about this bill. Number one, nothing in this bill stops a union from being formed. This is not an anti-worker, anti-labor, anti-union. Again, nothing in this bill will stop a union from being formed if that is the wish of the workers. Further, as the rules stand, as the NLRB rules stand right now, if majority workers have an intention to form a union, an employer can recognize that union. So they don't have to have a vote. The employer can decide whether or not to have a vote. And if so, and you meet these criterias, then that must be a secret ballot. But they don't have to have a vote if majority of workers have intentions of forming a union. If 30% of workers have an intention to form a union, then that goes to the NLRB. They will go ahead and conduct an election. And if you meet these criterias, and I'm going to go through those criterias again, if you fall under those criterias, then you must have a secret ballot vote. And Speaker previously had mentioned that employers are having to spend money to have these elections. In fact, NLRB oversees these elections at no cost to employers. So who are we targeting as far as who will be under this measure? Only companies are receiving defined incentives, and only at those specific facilities in those projects. So, if you have multiple facilities, but you're receiving tax incentives for one facility, then it will only apply to that facility. And it will be during the duration of that project as well. So it doesn't, just because you received a tax incentive, doesn't mean that it will forever, you fall under forever this secret ballot requirement for elections. It will go into effect for agreements that are signed after the effective date of this legislation. So in fact, if you already have a collective bargaining agreement, then this will not apply. And it also does not apply to subcontractors. So want to make sure that that is clear. I know the minority party had indicated and went over some federal preemption issues. Now, let me tell you that, again, the same arguments have been made in court. 4 other states have enacted similar measures. One state has challenged this, and it has failed. So this has already gone to court. Same arguments have been made, and it didn't work. So there is no preemption issues in this case. In this bill, not case. So again, we are, and on the federal law issue as well, let me just say that this bill is concerning the use of state economic development funds. It's not a regulatory action. So we are stating what we're doing with our tax incentives. And we're telling Georgians that when their tax dollars are going to support job creation, their neighbors are taking those jobs, then they have the right to make that choice, to unionize or not, which is consistent with federal law, and they have the right to make that choice as employees, and they have the right to say whether or not they are going to unionize. So this is not an anti-worker, anti-labor, anti-union, as you've continuously heard. We are ensuring that when state invests state resources to drive job creation, that hardworking Georgians who hold those jobs have the agency to determine whether to be represented by a labor union. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield the well.
Ladies, yielded the well. Representative Will Wade is recognized to speak to the bill. You have a few minutes left.
Thank you, Speaker. Thank you, colleagues. I just want to clarify a few things just to make sure that everyone is able to hear the full argument and the full points. A couple of things that were mentioned that I appreciate being brought up. This is a pro-worker bill because it's protecting their privacy as an employee to how they wish to vote. I would remind us that every one of us in this building was elected on a secret ballot. We're here under that process. I heard that there are some opponents, not all, but some, suggest that it's okay to cancel or not hold a secret ballot if the results are already known. That's extremely dangerous, in my view, and that's part of the reason that we want to ensure that tax incentive dollars are going to be a part of, not the sole feature, but the part of the qualifications to receive tax incentives through the Georgia Economic Development. The other thing I want to address is the fact that we are the #1 state in which to do business, but we're also a state that has the lowest unemployment rate in our state's history at 3.1%. And I would charge to you, based on some of my knowledge in economics, to the point that the quit rate is high is because we're a growing state for jobs, and we have more jobs than we have workers. And so that's an actual positive thing, that people have options to seek that next best job that will benefit them and their family. So those are some of the points that were brought up. I just wanted to bring clarity to, so that everyone would understand that this bill is very narrowly tailored to ensure that we have our tax incentives focused on good quality criteria to protect not only the worker and their right to have a secret ballot if a company chooses to receive a tax incentive, but also to continue to be the #1 place in Georgia to do business. With that, Speaker, I yield the well, and I ask for your favorable consideration for Senate Bill 362.
Gentleman has yielded the well. That completes the chairman's time, the minority report, and all the speakers on the bill. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All in favor of the passage of the bill will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? All members voted. For what purpose does Representative Jenkins rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that I'm probably the only or one of the only members of a union in this body as an employee of a union company? And this bill will in no way affect the employees' ability to unionize if that's what they want to do at their company. And it actually protects workers.
I'm sure the gentleman speaks the truth, knows what he speaks. For what purpose does Representative Roberts rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Isn't it true, Mr. Speaker, that I've lost count how many times I've objected to the majority party passing bills they know will result in expensive litigation, the burden of which will be paid for by Georgia taxpayers?
I'm sure the lady's keeping a good count. For what purpose does Representative Mike Cameron rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Isn't it true that I support this legislation because I want economic incentives in Georgia to benefit workers and not out-of-state unions?
I'm sure the gentleman believes what he speaks. All members voted. If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the passage of Senate Bill 362, the yeas are 96 and nays are 78. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Mr. Clerk, will you read the caption of Senate Bill 412?
Senate Bill 412 by Senator Kennedy the 18th, Cowswood the 46th, Summers the 13th, and others, be entitled an act to amend Title 43 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to professions and businesses so as to change certain provisions relating to administrative and civil sanctions against charitable organizations. This bill I refer to the Committee on Regulated Industries, The committee recommends that this bill do pass.
The gentleman from down in Bibb County, Representative Dale Washburn, is recognized to present Senate Bill 412. Representative Washburn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to present Senate Bill 412 by Senator Kennedy. This bill deals with charitable organizations in Georgia. Most always, our charitable organizations do good work, but unfortunately we do have some bad actors. And this just, the purpose of the bill is to raise the fines on them for a single violation from $250, which is obviously a very small fine, to $10,000, and for multiple violations up to $100,000. This is a good bill because bad actors in the nonprofit business that are taking money from honest Georgians need to have punishment that is a little more painful than what it currently exists. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I will yield for any questions.
The gentleman has a question to your left. Representative Kennard is recognized for a question.
Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir.
Can you give me a specific example of this kind of infraction of a bad actor that this bill would address?
Well, thank you very much for that question. Actually, we do have an example of an organization that was collecting money, and they ended up collecting, I believe it was $121,000 when they were found to be doing what they were doing was wrong by the Secretary of State's office. They were fined two fines of $250, which amounted to $500. And so obviously it was a very profitable operation for them to continue to collect that money and be fined only that small amount.
The gentleman has no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll yield the well.
The gentleman has yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All in favor of the passage of the bill will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no. And the clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? All members voted. If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the passage of Senate Bill 412, the yeas are 173, the nay is 1. This bill having received the requisite constitutional majority is therefore passed. Mr. Clerk, will you read the caption of Senate Bill 424?
Senate Bill 424 by Senators Robertson of the 29th, Brass of the 28th, being titled an act to create a new judicial circuit for the state of Georgia to be known as the West Georgia Judicial Circuit. This bill having been referred to the Committee on Judiciary. That committee recommends that this bill do pass.
The gentleman from Pine Mountain, Georgia, Representative Vance Smith, is recognized to present the bill. Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring to you today a proposition. The Coweta Circuit, which covers Troup County, Meriwether, Coweta, Heard, and Carroll, that judicial circuit has grown just like all of your judicial circuits, and with the state growing. So we saw the need, and it's been discussed amongst everybody in that circuit to split it, create the new West Georgia Judicial Circuit, and leave the Coweta Judicial Circuit. So that will put Carroll and Heard together, and then you'll have Troup County, Meriwether County, that'll put Carroll and Hurd together, and that'll put Troup County, Meriwether, and Coweta together. Everybody in the group has discussed this, and everybody's in favor. A number of representatives here on the floor. We've been discussing this pretty much all session. I see Representative Collins back there, my cousin Representative T.P. Smith, Representative David Huddleston, David Jenkins, Representative Lynn Smith, Chair Lady, excuse me, well, I'm going to forget you there. A number of us have discussed this, and we went to the judiciary, and it passed out unanimous, and I would ask for your favorable consent to let's improve this judicial circuit so they can handle their caseload and be a benefit to the citizens of this area. Mr. Speaker, are you of me any questions? If none,
You have a couple of questions there, Representative.
All right, thank you.
Representative Glaze has a question. Representative Lydia Glaze, out to your left.
Parliamentary procedure.
That's a
Is
question.
it not true?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it not true that Representative Mandisha Thomas and myself are in this same Coweta delegation? Is it not true that we also voted to make sure that this delegation got split so that we could do the business of the judiciary in both sides? And so we support this bill, and we thank you for bringing it.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. I'm honored to bring it to you, and thank you. We appreciate that.
You have one other question from a member of the Smith caucus that you missed. Representative Tyler Paul Smith to your left.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman cousin yield?
Yes, sir, I sure do.
Is it not true that although this divorce proceeding has been contentious at times, that we have now found amicable terms to part with one another on, and that each side would both probably use this Shakespearean quote that nothing became each other better than our leaving?
I agree with whatever you said there, Representative. It's kind of funny they got a non-lawyer bringing this bill up, so they picked me. But anyway, I agree with you. Mr. Speaker, look, I'm going to yield to you well, and I appreciate your favorable consideration.
That may be why it has a chance of passage, too. We'll see how that works out. You have no further questions. The gentleman's yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All in favor of the passage of the bill will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no. And Mr. Clerk, will you unlock the machine? Have all members voted if so? All members voted if so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the passage of Senate Bill 424, the yeas are 175, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Mr. Clerk, will you read the caption to Senate Bill 340, 340?
Senate Bill 340 by Senator Kirkpatrick of the 32nd, Albers of the 56th, Huffstetler of the 52nd, and others, to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 48.83 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating exemptions from sales and use taxes so as to exempt sales of firearm safes and firearm safety devices. This bill having referred to the Committee on Ways and Means, that committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Okay, members, you've heard the caption to the bill. You need to pay particular attention to the presenter of the bill on the subject matter. So with that, I'll recognize Representative Joe Campbell to present Senate Bill 340.
Hello? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm presenting SB 340 today. The original language from SB 340 is no longer in this bill. And
okay, that'll be better now. I was wondering what was going on.
Is that better? Is that better?
Representative, is this the third or fourth time you've been in the well to present a bill?
Second.
Second, okay.
I think that's right. So I'm presenting SB 340 today. The original language from SB 340 is no longer in this bill, and we want to thank Senator Kirkpatrick for working with us and helping us with this, and we appreciate it. This is a clarifying bill to address a gap in the Georgia Agricultural Tax Exemption Program called GATE, which prevents the pyramiding of taxes by exempting agricultural inputs. Since 2015, the EPA requires the use of diesel exhaust fluid called DEF, in certain equipment like tractors to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. This product is a mandated input, and the equipment will not operate without it. Because this is a relatively new product, it's not explicitly addressed in current law, although it is well within the spirit of the GATE program. Both Department of Revenue and the Department of Agriculture are supportive with this inclusion, but would like it spelled out in code to clarify for both producers and those auditors that administer the program. DEF is a fuel additive that reduces carbon emissions. DEF is required by federal regulation. It's mandated. They have to use it. And Mr. Speaker, that sums up the program, and so I ask for your favorable consideration.
Did you yield the will, or are you going to take a couple of questions?
I'll yield the will, that'd be fine.
Amen. Gentlemen, yielded the will. I knew that was a smart man from the day I first met him. What can I say? Good choice. Is there an objection to the previous question being ordered? Chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there an objection to adopting the committee's substitute? Chair hears none. The committee's substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All in favor of the passage of the bill will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? All members voted. If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the passage of Senate Bill 340. The yeas are 169. The nays 1. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. That completes our rules calendar for today. Congratulations. Good work. Your predecessors would be proud of you. No doubt about that. For what purpose, Representative Bonner rise?
Make a motion.
State your motion.
I move that Senate Bill 203 be moved from the Judiciary Committee to the Defense and Veteran Affairs Committee. Both chairmen are in agreement.
Mr. Clerk, will you read the caption?
Senate Bill 203 to be entitled an act to amend Article 3, Chapter 4, Title 20 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to industry services training programs so as to provide for tuition-free programs that relate to the operation of commercial motor vehicles for veterans.
On the gentleman's motion that Senate Bill 203 be withdrawn from the Judiciary Committee and recommitted to Defense and Veteran Affairs Committee, is there objection? Hearing none, it is so ordered. For what purpose does Representative Lynn Smith rise?
I'd like to make a motion, parliamentary inquiry.
I think it's a motion. State your motion.
I'd like to make a motion that the rules be temporarily suspended so that a bill may be read for the first time and assigned to committee.
I thought we would. Okay. Mr. Clerk, will you read the caption?
A unnumbered House resolution creating the House Study Committee on Navigable Streams and Related Matters.
On the lady's motion that the rules of this House be temporarily suspended so a bill can be read for the first time and assigned to committee, is there objection? Hearing none. Natural Resources and Environment. Members, that was oversight on my part. We had several requests for suspending the rules on most of the bills were for study committees, and I'll let that one sneak in, Chair Lady, so my bad. So we'll just hear all the rest of them tomorrow, or they'll still be timely on those suspending the rules. So I hope y'all are okay with that decision. Okay, we'll move on to afternoon orders at this time. So Chairman Dickey is recognized for an afternoon order. Chairman Dickey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, I know we've heard a lot about ag today, but this week is Georgia celebrates Ag Week, and our Commissioner of Agriculture, Tyler Harper, has got many activities going on to celebrate and pay tribute to Georgia's #1 industry, agriculture. We have a photo contest, Buy Georgia Grown, Ag Hero Day, and Ag Literacy Day. I hope you participate and talk up our #1 industry in our state, agriculture. It's Ag Week. Thank you.
Representative Will Wade. Recognized for an afternoon order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to announce history that has been made in District 9 in Dahlonega, Georgia. The University of North Georgia men's basketball team are region champs. They punched their ticket for the first time in program history, NCAA Division II. They're going to Indiana on March 26th for the next round of the national championship. Very proud of the coach and the team and my alma mater, and they were 28-6 in the season so far, and they're going for a national championship. So well done, Nighthawks. Thank you.
Chairman Knight. Representative Nolowitz, the Spalding Griffin delegation, welcome to the well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Hold just 1 second. Let Representative Nolowitz get up here with you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There was a House resolution that we put in the other day, and again, it's a bipartisan resolution, but this is dealing with something that's very near and dear to our heart, not only from Terry and I as co-chair of the Georgia-Japanese Legislative Caucus, and again, you've heard us up here many times. Japan is one of our largest trade partners in Georgia, and quite frankly, one of our best strategic allies in the world, but they invest in Georgia. And particularly, there's a company called Renai. How many people have a tankless water heater? I do. You love them, don't you? They are awesome. Yeah, it's great. But here's what's going on. The Department of Energy.
This is important.
The Department of Energy has proposed new efficiency regulations. And quite frankly, I have the Renai plant that's about 4 miles from my home. That Renai plant serves North America and Canada. It is the Renai plant that is making tankless water heaters. Josh has their headquarters next door in Peachtree City. They have invested significant money in Georgia, particularly our state, and they are supplying good Georgia jobs. The Department of Energy has come in and has placed unattainable energy standards and is basically will almost shut down the plant that was built 3 or 4 years ago in Georgia in our district. Quite frankly, it has to deal with the efficiency. Already, these tankless water heaters are about 81% efficient. And they've basically taken that out, and they're allowing the tank hot water heaters, which have an efficiency, they're moving it up to a 0.63 to exist. We don't understand. This is not only bad for Georgia and our investment by our partners, but this is bad for Georgians, it's bad for consumers, and it's bad for the employees that have good jobs there in Georgia, and particularly with Renai. And they are world-renowned research, they're an efficient company, and they make some of the best products that are out there. We wanted to let you know about this resolution, and we need any help you can get to make sure that we address this with the Department of Energy and make sure that they try to change their regulations so that we don't shut down this plant. And quite frankly, I'll make one last comment. The tank heaters, the ones that have tanks, most of the majority of those tanks are made in China, and they are less efficient. It's going to put more of the pollutants in the air, and quite frankly, it's a disaster. I know Josh wanted to say something as far as the corporate headquarters in Peachtree City.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Renai has been such a great corporate partner for us in our community in Peachtree City. We are calling today, not only through our presence here at the well, but through this resolution, we're calling on our House and Senate delegation to engage at the federal level to help resolve this issue. We were very disappointed to find out today that the calls by the leadership of Renai to our Senate delegation have gone unanswered. And so we are calling upon our 2 U.S. senators to step up and engage in this issue and protect a Georgia company. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you for the information. We appreciate it. Representative Al, you're recognized for an afternoon order. Give the lady your attention, please.
Good afternoon. It's that special time of year again. We are announcing our second Gold Dome blood drive will be tomorrow between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m., so basically all day, outside the Capitol between this building and the CLOB. I know it's late in session, and people are like, I don't want to give blood because I don't want to feel bad because it's almost sine die. If I can give you a piece of advice, that morning that you're intending to give blood, and you can certainly walk in, you don't need to make an appointment, walk in tomorrow, eat breakfast. If you drink coffee, drink your coffee that morning, that's fine. Before you go in, drink 2 bottles of water. After you give blood, they're going to give you snacks, they're going to give you Gatorade. Drink the Gatorade they give you and eat the snack, and you're going to feel fine. If I can do it, you can do it. I know many people may not be able to give blood because of medical reasons or because of fasting for Ramadan or because of travel history. That's okay. Don't feel guilty. What you need to do is find someone else, find a friend, find 2 friends, find 3 friends, and ask them to give for you. Thank you so much. Let's break another record this time around, and I yield the well.
Members, hope you will listen up to this next afternoon order. Representatives Carpenter, Tarvin, and Ridley. If you'll join me in standing.
Man, we hate to come to the well again for stuff, but our community lost an icon on Monday. Jane Peoples Stanfield passed away pretty abruptly. She found out she had cancer in January, and she passed away on Monday. Daughter of Shelby Peoples, someone who was really involved in politics in our community, in our state, and in our nation. And it's just a really wonderful family. Was heavily involved in the hospital, heavily involved in the Alzheimer's Association, Dancing with the Stars, raised millions of dollars for both causes. So the family's grieving, the community's grieving, and we just want to ask for a moment of silence. Thank you, Speaker. We yield the well.
Thank you. Our sympathy goes out to the family. That concludes our afternoon orders. Mr. Clerk, will you read the caption to a group of privileged resolutions?
Honoring the life and memory of Joyce Mims. Recognizing and commending the Georgia chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics and its members in observance of the chapter's 70th anniversary. Recognizing and commending Reverend Abraham Mosley on the occasion of his 50th pastoral anniversary. Recognizing and commending the Sandy Springs Fire Department, supporting the renaming of Shoal Creek Park 3 to the Johns Evans Legacy Park, recognizing March 26, 2024 as Executive Function Day at the State Capitol, and recognizing the Festival of Navroz, as well as the Shia Ismaili Muslim community residing in and contributing to the state of Georgia, and for other purposes. That completes the reading of the privilege resolutions.
Is there any objection to adopting the privilege resolutions? Chair hears none, and the resolutions are adopted. Representative Bazemore, let's hear your announcement. We'll move on to announcements.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tomorrow at 1:30 in room 216, the City of South Fulton delegation will be meeting, and there will be lunch served.
Chair Lady Lynn Smith is recognized for an announcement.
Good afternoon, colleagues. There'll be a House Natural Resource and Environment Committee meeting tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, 606 CLOB. Thank you.
Chairman Todd Jones is recognized for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the TII committee, we will be meeting at 3:15 and 406. We will be taking up a bill. Thank you.
Chair Lady Sharon Cooper is recognized for an announcement. Take your time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the Public Health and Community Committee, we will be meeting as soon as we finish here. We are lucky we have room 403 upstairs. There's one bill on the committee. It will not hold you long. If we can get if we have a quorum, and then you can go on to other meetings. So as soon as we can get upstairs to room 403. Thank you very much.
Chairman Mitchell, Chairman Billy Mitchell, recognized for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Democratic Caucus will meet tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. in room 605 in the CLOB. Breakfast will be served. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Hong is recognized for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Judiciary Hong Subcommittee, Judiciary Non-Civil Hong Subcommittee will meet at 3:30, and then we will have the full Judiciary Non-Civil Committee 15 minutes after the subcommittee. Thank you.
Representative Anderson is recognized for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Governmental Affairs will meet at 3:30 in CLOB 606. 3:30 and 606. Thank you.
Chairman Saines is recognized for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Special Rules will meet for a quick meeting in 406 at 4 o'clock today for 2 bills.
That completes our announcements. Let me talk to you a little bit about the posture of the Senate, because I know that they have committee meetings and rules that we need to be on top of this afternoon. So they're going So they think they will complete their work around 4 p.m. And of course, their rules meets immediately upon adjournment. So if you have something that you want to bring to their rules committee that you're asking for, you need to be monitoring when they come into their rules meeting, when they adjourn. And I can see they're still working over there. So you need to be prepared for that if you have something in their rules that you want to ask for. Then their committees will be on the same posture when they adjourn. Those committees, I know I'd spoken to someone, I think Representative Seabaugh, they had an insurance committee he was interested in, was supposed to meet at 2. So that's just going to push all the way back to when they adjourn. So their committees will meet this afternoon, but just later than scheduled. Rules probably at around 4 when they adjourn, and then committees after that. So you just need to be monitoring, watching, and make sure you have a contact. So it's critical, y'all. If you don't ask, you don't receive. I'm not sure you're going to receive, but you at least got to ask so we can all try to move forward with important legislation that this House has passed. Majority Leader of this House now is recognized for a motion. Leader Illustration.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that this House stand in recess until 4 o'clock p.m. and then stand adjourned until 10 a.m. on Thursday, March 21st, 2024.
On the motion of the Majority Leader that this House stands in recess until 4 p.m. today, at which time we will adjourn until tomorrow, Thursday, March the 21st, 2024 at 10 a.m. 10 a.m. All those in favor of the Majority Leader's motion will say aye. All those opposed will say no. It's getting closer, but I know y'all want to hang around here. But the ayes have it. We are in recess until 4 p.m., at which time we will stand adjourned.
Hey, real quick on this one, Darlene.